The Adoshan race huddled in their doomsday shelters, resigned to their fate, until the human ships punched through the atmosphere, bringing salvation with them. When astronomers on distant Eidos detected the massive asteroid hurtling towards their homeworld, they knew it meant the end. An impact event of this magnitude would shatter continents, boil oceans, and blot out the sun. The Adoshan High Council mobilized their brightest scientific minds and most advanced technology to find a way to avert the cataclysm. But as the fateful day drew nearer, every plan failed. Eidos had mere months left. Jason Tucker, the human diplomat assigned to Eidos, stood in the High Council chamber amongst a sea of despair. The Adoshan leaders informed him of their impending doom and the futility of further efforts. But Jason refused to let an entire civilization die without a fight. He fired off a quantum transmission to Earth, detailing the situation and pleading for aid. Earth's top scientists worked feverishly to analyze the data. Within days, they reached a consensus. The Adoshan's proposal to use an antimatter bomb had the highest chance of success. But the Adoshans lacked the exotic materials and advanced facilities needed to construct such a device in time. If Eidos were to survive, humanity would have to take the lead. In an unprecedented show of global unity, the nations of Earth pooled their resources and expertise. The Earth Space Alliance quickly assembled a crack team of the world's best astronauts, engineers, and crisis responders. A small fleet of humanity's most advanced ships, outfitted with the latest technology, stood ready to embark on the most important mission in human history. Jason volunteered to guide the expedition, his years on Eidos making him uniquely suited to navigate the planet's dangers and deal with the locals. He knew they had to reach the Adoshan capital fast to deliver the critical antimatter bomb components. Any delay would mean extinction. When the human fleet reached Eidos, a grim sight awaited them. Adoshan cities burned as the social order collapsed. Massive refugee ships clogged the orbitals, and rogue militias fired indiscriminately on anything that moved. A final desperate transmission from the Adoshan government provided landing coordinates near the capital, then went silent. Jason piloted his ship through the chaos, the rest of the human fleet close behind. Time was almost up, but one last hope remained for the doomed Adoshans. As the human ships descended through the ash-choked sky, Jason steeled himself for whatever challenges lay ahead. The fate of an entire species was now in human hands. The charred, twisted metal of the landing ramp groaned and clanked under their boots as Jason Tucker and his team disembarked onto the ravaged soil of Eidos. They moved quickly, hefting crates of gleaming antimatter bomb components. But Jason paused as he took in the once proud Adosian capital. Magnificent crystalline towers that had pierced the clouds now lay shattered across cratered streets. Pillars of greasy smoke curled into the sky from countless fires. And everywhere, the crumpled, scorched bodies of Adosians littered the ruins like broken dolls. "Jason Tucker?" A voice rang out across the rubble. "I am Ceres, Chief Science Minister." Jason turned to see a haggard Adosian figure emerge from a hidden doorway, his iridescent scales dulled by ash. "Minister Ceres, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Many do not get that luxury today," Ceres replied grimly. "Come, we haven't much time. The military has turned on itself. Rogue factions hold the spaceport and the approaches to the launch facility. We will have to fight for every span of ground to reach it." Jason clicked his comlink. "Devlin, get our bird in the air. Link up with any Adoshan forces still holding orbit. Keep those skies clear for our launch." As the human ship lifted away on rumbling thrusters, Jason and Ceres joined the soldiers mounting a motley assortment of armored transports. Engines roared to life and they surged forward, weaving through the blasted landscape. It wasn't long before rogue Adoshan troops opened fire from the skeletal remains of a shopping complex. Blue energy bolts sizzled past, but the human gunners responded with a volley of searing plasma that melted steel and drove the attackers back. They pushed forward, grinding over rubble and craters, weathering ambushes and blockades. The rogue Adoshans fought with desperate ferocity, but the human soldiers countered with ruthless efficiency and superior firepower. Slowly, bloodily, they punched through each successive enemy position. Suddenly, a barrage of heavy disruptor fire hammered into their convoy. One transport exploded in a blinding fireball, raining molten debris. Heart pounding, Jason stared at the burning wreckage and the scattered, blackened bomb components. He punched the bulkhead. They didn't have enough now. "The antimatter," Ceres groaned. "We can't complete the device, unless there is a research station nearby. It has a stockpile of refined antimatter, but the area is thick with enemy forces." Jason closed his eyes for a long moment, then keyed his comlink. "All right, listen up. Change of plans." Soon they reached a fork in the rubble-strewn road. Jason watched grimly as half his team rumbled off to secure the launch facility with what payload remained. Then he signaled his own contingent forward toward the distant glint of the research station, toward the lion's den. They came under heavy fire as soon as the battered complex came into view. Disruptor bolts and plasma blasts crisscrossed as Jason and his soldiers battled from room to shattered room. 2 men went down in a choke point, but the rest hurtled their bodies and pushed on. The air crackled with ionized particles and ozone. Finally, they broke through to the central lab module. Jason kicked through the buckled door, rifle leveled. A lone rogue Idosian soldier spun from a bank of equipment, hands scrambling for his weapon. Jason put a plasma bolt through his head before he could raise it. "There," Ceres called out, pointing to a reinforced vault door. The humans swiftly planted breaching charges and blew it open in a spray of sparks and smoke. Inside, specialized containment canisters glowed with swirling antimatter. They grabbed them and ran. The battered remnants of Jason's team reached the launch facility as a baleful shadow engulfed the base. The asteroid, close enough now to make out surface details, seemed to fill the entire sky. The other humans had the rocket prepped and primed, the payload chassis open and waiting. As the scientists gingerly slotted the antimatter canisters into place, fresh disruptor fire rained down from rogue Idosian positions in the rubble. Jason and his surviving soldiers raced for cover, laying down blistering counterfire. "Jason!" Ceres shouted over the din of battle, his voice strained. "We're loaded and locked! Go!" Gritting his teeth, Jason keyed the firing sequence. The rocket shuddered, then leapt free of its moorings in a blaze of chemical thrust. The launch rocked the pad, knocking soldiers from both sides off their feet. Within moments, the glare of the rocket's engines had dwindled to a bright speck high above. Every eye, human and Idosian, tracked it as it clawed its way into the stars, carrying a world's last hope in a package of metal and valence. The antimatter bomb arced across the void, moving to intercept the asteroid as it blazed through the upper atmosphere. Tendrils of superheated plasma trailed from the tumbling rock as it shed velocity. The 2 dots converged, grew larger and brighter, until they met in a blinding, silent flash that seared Jason's retinas and sent Ceres staggering. Jason Tucker stood amid the ruins of the once proud Idosian capital, surveying the devastation. Shattered crystal towers jutted from piles of rubble like broken teeth. Makeshift tent cities sprawled across scorched parks, filled with displaced Idosians. The air reeked of smoke and despair. "Another convoy hit," reported Lieutenant Zix, his iridescent scales dulled by ash. "That's the 3rd this week." Jason clenched his fists. "The Idosian Redemption Army?" Zix nodded grimly. "Left their calling card. 6 human aid workers dead." "Damn it," Jason muttered. He activated his comms unit. "Earth Command, this is Tucker. We need reinforcements. The situation is deteriorating rapidly." The response came back garbled, but clear enough. "Negative, Tucker. No additional resources available at this time. You'll have to make do." Jason smacked his palm against a nearby wall. "Make do? We're barely holding on as it is." Days later, Jason sprinted through the corridors of the government complex, plasma rifle in hand. Alarms blared as smoke filled the air. He burst into the main chamber to find Ceres slumped against his desk, blue blood oozing from a chest wound. "Jason," Ceres wheezed. "The ERA. They're getting bolder." "Save your strength," Jason said, applying pressure to the wound. "Medics on the way." Ceres gripped Jason's arm with surprising strength. "Promise me, you'll stop them, no matter what it takes." Jason met the dying Adosian's gaze. "I promise." In the weeks that followed, Jason threw himself into training the loyal Adosian forces. He drilled them relentlessly in human combat tactics, pushing them to their limits. "Again!" he barked as the Adosian squad fumbled through a breach in clear exercise. "Move like you mean it!" Simultaneously, Jason oversaw humanitarian efforts. He stood in the ruins of a bombed-out neighborhood, directing the distribution of supplies. "Make sure everyone gets something," he instructed a human aid worker. "We need to show them we're here to help." The ERA response was swift and brutal. Jason awoke to the sound of explosions rocking the human encampment. He raced outside to see fireballs blooming across the compound. "Suicide bombers!" someone screamed. As the dust settled, Jason surveyed the carnage. Dozens of bodies, human and Adosian alike, lay scattered among the wreckage. "We can't take another hit like this," Jason muttered. That night, Jason huddled with his top Adosian officers, poring over intelligence reports. "Savrin's compound is here," he said, pointing to a location on the holomap. "If we can take him out, we might break the ERA's back." Under cover of darkness, Jason led a strike team through the mountain passes. They moved silently, using stealth tech to avoid detection. At the compound's perimeter, Jason signaled a halt. "On my mark," he whispered. They breached the outer defenses in a fury of plasma fire and stun grenades. Jason fought his way through corridor after corridor, taking down ERA fighters with practiced efficiency. Finally, they reached the command bunker. Jason kicked down the door to find General Savrin reaching for a weapon. "Don't even think about it," Jason growled, training his rifle on the Adosian's head. Suddenly, alarms blared. "Sir!" an Adosian soldier shouted. "ERA reinforcements incoming!" Jason grabbed Savrin and activated his comms. "This is Tucker. We need immediate evac." For a heart-stopping moment, there was only static. Then a welcome voice crackled through. "Copy that, Tucker. Air support inbound." The roar of engines filled the air as human gunships swooped in, raining fire on the advancing ERA forces. Jason and his team fought their way to the extraction point, dragging their high-value prisoner with them. As they boarded the waiting dropship, Jason allowed himself a grim smile. The tide was turning. The tide was turning, but victory came at a steep price. Jason watched as General Savrin was escorted into the detention facility, his iridescent scales dulled by grime and defeat. The Adosian separatist leader's capture had yielded vital intelligence, and now it was time to act. Jason pored over holographic maps of the Adosian capital, marking targets as Savrin's intel filtered in. "Here, here, and here," he said, jabbing his finger at glowing red dots. "ERA weapons caches. We hit them hard and fast." For weeks, the city echoed with the sounds of battle. Human and Adosian forces moved as one, breaching fortified positions and neutralizing threat after threat. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, punctuated by the thunderous explosions of breaching charges. In a bombed-out factory, Jason crouched behind a fallen pillar, sweat stinging his eyes. "Alpha Team, status?" he barked into his comm. "Southeast quadrant clear, sir," came the reply. "Roger that. Beta Team, move up." The world exploded, a searing flash, a deafening roar, and Jason found himself thrown across the room. Pain lanced through his body as he struggled to focus. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the frantic voices of his team. "Man down! We've got 2 KIA!" Jason tried to move, but agony shot through his leg. He was pinned down, exposed to enemy fire that peppered his position. With trembling hands, he pulled out a hollow image of Ceres, the fallen Adosian leader's eyes seeming to bore into him. "Not like this," Jason growled. He shoved the pain aside, forcing himself to his feet. "All units push forward. We end this now." Limping but resolute, Jason led the charge. He burst through a door, his rifle spitting plasma bolts. 2 ERA fighters fell before they could raise their weapons. A third rushed him with a vibroblade, but Jason ducked under the swing and drove his combat knife into the attacker's throat. Room by room, they cleared the facility. When it was over, Jason leaned heavily against a wall, his wounds finally catching up to him. But they had won. The ERA's ability to wage war was crippled. Weeks later, Jason stood before a gathering of human and Idosian dignitaries. His legs still ached, a constant reminder of the battles fought. An Idosian official stepped forward, pinning Idos's highest civilian honor to Jason's chest. "For your courage, your leadership, your unwavering commitment to peace," the official intoned. But Jason's mind was already elsewhere. He nodded curtly and strode from the podium, brushing off congratulations. In his quarters, he pulled up the latest intelligence reports. "The Kordax caverns," he muttered, studying the complex network of underground passages. "So that's where you're hiding." Jason assembled his team, a mix of battle-hardened humans and Idosians. They gathered around as he laid out the mission. "This is it," he said, his voice grave. "The ERA leadership, their bioweapons, everything. We go in hard, we go in fast, and we don't stop until it's done." They geared up in silence, donning advanced powered armor and checking weapons. Sleek combat drones hummed to life, ready to provide tactical support. The descent into the Kordax caverns was treacherous. Narrow passages threatened to collapse at any moment. Toxic gas sensors blinked warnings. And always, the ever-present threat of ERA ambush. They encountered the first resistance at a choke point. ERA fighters opened fire from concealed positions, their energy weapons illuminating the darkness. Jason's team responded with precision, their enhanced armor allowing them to weather the assault. "Push through," Jason shouted, leading the charge. His rifle barked, each shot finding its mark. They fought their way deeper, the caverns echoing with weapons fire and the screams of the wounded. A cave-in claimed 2 of Jason's soldiers, their cries cut short by tons of falling rock. Finally, they reached the bioweapons stockpile. As Jason began coordinating its secure extraction, his comm crackled to life. "Sir, emergency transmission from the surface." Jason's blood ran cold as he listened to the report. A human refugee camp, bombed, over 100 dead, women, children, aid workers trying to help. Rage boiled within him. He stared at the secured bioweapons, then at the path leading deeper into the caverns. "New plan," he growled. "We're going after the leadership, right now." His team looked at him, saw the fire in his eyes, and nodded. They understood. This ended today, one way or another. Jason checked his weapon and took point. They plunged into the darkness, leaving the bioweapons behind. Whatever lay ahead, whatever the cost, the ERA would answer for their crimes. Jason Tucker pressed his back against the rough cavern wall, the cool stone a stark contrast to the sweat beading on his skin. He signaled to his team, their faces barely visible in the dim light of their helmet-mounted lamps. They moved forward in silence, each step calculated to avoid loose rocks that might betray their presence. The air grew thick with an acrid smell as they ventured deeper into the Kordax caverns. Jason's HUD flashed warnings of increasing toxicity levels. He tapped the side of his helmet, engaging the air filtration system with a soft hiss. "Contact," whispered Lieutenant Zix through the comm. Motion sensors picking up activity ahead. Jason raised a fist, halting the squad. He peered around a jagged outcropping, spotting the telltale glint of an ERA sentry's armor. With practiced efficiency, he signaled a flanking maneuver. The team split, moving like ghosts through the shadows. Jason counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They struck in unison. Zix's plasma rifle whined, dropping 2 guards before they could react. Jason vaulted over a low boulder, his boot connecting with the chest of a 3rd sentry. The Idosian went down hard, weapon clattering away into the darkness. "Clear," Jason breathed, scanning for additional threats. They pressed on, encountering a series of crude but deadly traps. Laser tripwires crisscrossed narrow passages. Pressure plates threatened to trigger cave-ins. Jason's team disabled each with practiced precision, the fruits of countless hours of training. Finally, they reached a massive steel door set into the cavern wall. Jason ran his hand over the smooth surface, feeling the faint vibration of machinery beyond. "This is it," he muttered. "Breach charges now." As his team set the explosives, Jason's mind raced. What horrors lay beyond? How many innocent lives hung in the balance? The charges detonated with a thunderous roar, the shockwave rattling Jason's teeth even through his helmet. As the smoke cleared, they surged forward into the vault. The scene that greeted them was a nightmare made real. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens displaying maps of Eidos's major population centers. In the center of the room stood General Krax, his scales a sickly green in the harsh light of the command center. "Surrender, Krax!" Jason shouted, training his weapon on the Eidosian leader. "It's over!" Krax's face contorted in a rictus of hate. "Never!" he snarled, pounding his fist down on a control panel. The vault shuddered. Alarms blared as the main entrance began to seal shut. Jason lunged forward, but it was too late. The massive door slammed closed with a resounding boom. "Zix status," Jason barked. The lieutenant's voice crackled over the comm. "We're cut off, sir. The tunnel's collapsing behind us." Jason's blood ran cold as he saw the fear in his soldiers' eyes. They were trapped, with no way out and dwindling air. And if the shaking of the vault was any indication, their problems were just beginning. "New objective," Jason growled, his voice steady despite the panic clawing at his chest. "Find Krax and Solon. Stop them before they can activate the bioweapons. Move." The air filled with the whine of energy weapons as ERA forces opened fire from concealed positions. Jason's team scattered, taking cover behind computer banks and storage crates. "Suppressing fire!" Jason ordered, popping up to squeeze off a burst from his rifle. The acrid smell of ozone mixed with the choking dust, kicked up by near misses. Through the chaos, Jason caught a glimpse of Dr. Solon sprinting toward a sealed containment unit. The Eidosian scientist's fingers flew over a keypad, the chamber beginning to hiss open. "No!" Jason roared. He vaulted over his cover, ignoring the plasma bolts sizzling past his head. Time seemed to slow as he raised his weapon, sighting down the barrel at Solon's back. Jason squeezed the trigger. Once, twice, 3 times. Solon jerked as the rounds impacted, slumping forward against the containment unit. The chamber slid shut with a pneumatic hiss, its deadly contents still sealed within. A primal scream of rage cut through the firefight. Jason whirled to see General Krax emerging from a side room, now clad in a bulky hazmat suit. The Eidosian's eyes blazed with madness as he brandished a cluster of vials filled with sickly-colored liquids. "If we can't have Eidos," Krax ranted, "no one will." Jason charged forward, closing the distance before Krax could uncap the vials. They collided in a tangle of limbs, grappling for control. Jason felt the hazmat suit's material tear under his fingers as they rolled across the floor. Krax fought like a cornered animal, all pretense of military discipline gone. He clawed at Jason's face, trying to rupture his helmet's seal. Jason drove his knee into the Eidosian's midsection, feeling ribs crack under the blow. With a surge of desperate strength, Jason managed to wrench one of Krax's arms behind his back. He dragged the thrashing Eidosian towards an airlock chamber, every step a battle. "No!" Krax howled as Jason shoved him inside. "You can't!" Jason smacked his fist on the airlock controls. The hatch sealed shut, cutting off Krax's screams. Through the small window, Jason watched as the general's ravings turned to choking gasps. The bioagents he had sought to unleash filled the chamber, their effects swift and horrific. Turning away from the grisly sight, Jason surveyed the command center. The firefight had died down, his team securing the last of the ERA forces, but their victory was short-lived. "Sir," one of his soldiers called out, voice tight with fear, "our air scrubbers are failing. Toxicity levels are rising fast." Jason's mind raced. They had stopped the immediate threat, but at what cost? With their exit blocked and life support failing, they had only traded one death sentence for another. He keyed his long-range communicator, praying the signal could penetrate the rock above. "This is Tucker. We're trapped in an underground WMD vault. Need immediate evac. I repeat, immediate evac required." Static was his only reply. Jason looked at his team, their faces a mix of commitment and growing despair. He wouldn't abandon them. Not now. Not after everything they'd sacrificed. "Hold the line," he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. "Help is coming. We just need to hang on." But as the minutes ticked by, Jason watched his soldiers succumb one by one to the toxic miasma filling the vault. Their hazmat gear, designed for short-term exposure, began to fail under the onslaught of weaponized pathogens. Jason knelt beside his last remaining soldier, Private Chen. The young man's breathing came in ragged gasps, his visor fogged with condensation. "Stay with me, Chen," Jason urged, gripping the private's hand. "Don't you dare give up now." Chen's eyes, visible through the clouded faceplate, locked onto Jason's. His lips moved, forming words Jason couldn't hear, but understood all the same. "Thank you, sir." A tear slid down Jason's cheek as Chen's grip went slack. He was alone now, surrounded by the still forms of his fallen comrades. The vault's air grew thick and hazy. Jason's own breathing labored despite his suit's protections. His vision swam, darkness encroaching at the edges. Was this how it would end, after everything they'd accomplished? A low rumble shook the chamber, growing in intensity. Jason struggled to focus, wondering if it was just another hallucination brought on by oxygen deprivation. Then, the ceiling exploded in a shower of rock and dust. Blinding light poured in from above, accompanied by the whine of powerful engines. Hazmat-suited figures rappelled into the vault on shimmering lifelines. Their voices sounded tinny and distant through Jason's failing audio sensors. "We've got survivors. Get them to decon now." Jason felt strong hands lifting him, securing him to a harness. As consciousness slipped away, his last thought was of relief. They had done it. They had stopped the ERA. The rest would be up to those who came after. The world faded to black as Jason was pulled up towards the light, leaving the horrors of the Kordax caverns behind. The harsh lights of the isolation chamber burned Jason's eyes as he regained consciousness. He blinked, his vision blurry and unfocused. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils, mixed with an unfamiliar metallic tang. "He's awake," a voice said, muffled through layers of protective gear. Jason tried to speak, but his throat felt raw and parched. He lifted a hand to his face, then froze. Something was wrong. His skin felt different, alien. A human doctor leaned over him, her face obscured by a containment suit. "Take it easy, Jason. You've been through a lot." He stared at his arm, horror mounting as he saw the faint silvery lines crisscrossing his flesh. They pulsed with an eerie inner light, like circuitry come alive. What happened to me?" Jason croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctor hesitated, exchanging glances with an Adosian colleague. "You were exposed to multiple bioweapons in the Kordax vault. We had to use experimental nanotechnology to save your life." Jason's heart raced as he ran his hands over his body, feeling the subtle changes. His fingers brushed against something protruding from his skull. Smooth, metallic input jacks. "No!" he breathed, panic rising. "What have you done?" The next few days passed in a haze of tests and explanations. Jason learned of the agonizing process that had saved his life, rewriting his very DNA to combat the Adosian bioweapons. He struggled to reconcile his gratitude for survival with the profound violation he felt. One morning he stood before a mirror, truly seeing his altered form for the first time. The nanofiber arrays beneath his skin created intricate shifting patterns. His eyes now held a faint cybernetic glow. "Am I even human anymore?" Jason whispered, touching his reflection. Weeks of physical therapy and psychological counseling followed. Jason grappled with his new abilities, enhanced strength, accelerated healing, and an intuitive interface with technology. But the cost deeply affected on his mind. Finally, after months of recovery, Jason prepared to resume his duties. He adjusted the high collar of his diplomatic uniform, concealing as much of his altered skin as possible. A knock at the door startled him. Prime Minister Alorn entered, his scaled face unreadable. "Ambassador Tucker, it's good to see you on your feet." Jason nodded stiffly. "Thank you, Prime Minister." Alorn's eyes roamed over Jason's form, lingering on the visible cybernetic enhancements. "You represent a new chapter in our shared history, Jason. A bridge between our species, made flesh." "With all due respect, sir," Jason said, his voice tight, "I didn't ask for this." "Few are given the choice to become pioneers," Alorn replied. "But here we are. The question is, what will you do with this gift?" As they walked to the first diplomatic summit since Jason's transformation, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. Hushed whispers followed in his wake. Some faces showed awe, others barely concealed revulsion. Jason took his place at the podium, acutely aware of the divide his mere presence was creating. As he began to speak, he saw the future balancing on a knife's edge. Would his sacrifice bring their worlds together or tear them apart? The answer, he realized with a chill, might no longer be solely in human hands. Jason stared at his reflection in the polished metal wall of his quarters, tracing the silvery lines that pulsed beneath his skin. His fingers brushed against the input jacks protruding from his skull, a constant reminder of his transformation. The enhanced strength coursing through his body felt alien, unearned. "What am I now?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. A sudden explosion rocked the building, shattering the moment of introspection. Jason's cybernetic senses kicked in, flooding his mind with tactical data. Another bombing, the third this week. He sprinted down the corridor, his augmented muscles propelling him at inhuman speeds. Guards scrambled to keep up as he burst into the command center. Prime Minister Alorn stood hunched over a holographic display, his scales a mottled mix of stress and anger. The ERA struck again, a nanotech research facility in the southern quadrant. Jason's enhanced vision scanned the casualty reports scrolling across nearby screens. The numbers made his stomach churn. "This has to stop," Jason said, his voice tight. "We need to open a dialogue with the Separatists before—" Alorn cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Negotiate with terrorists? No. Your very existence proves the necessity of our path forward. We will crush this insurrection." Before Jason could argue further, an aide rushed in. "Sir, we've intercepted ERA communications. They've acquired Idosian plasma cannons." Alorn's eyes narrowed. "Then we strike first. Prepare the bombers." "Wait!" Jason pleaded. "You can't—" But his words fell on deaf ears as Alorn barked orders. Within minutes, Idosian fighters screamed across the sky, raining fire on suspected ERA strongholds. Jason watched in horror as the conflict he'd fought to end reignited with terrifying ferocity. Both sides invoked his name, savior to some, abomination to others. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had become the catalyst for this nightmare. Guilt gnawed at him as reports flooded in of escalating violence across Eidos. He paced his quarters, mind racing. There had to be a way to stop this madness. An idea formed, born of desperation. If his mere existence had pushed them to this brink, perhaps it could also shock them back from it. Jason accessed the facility's armory with his biometric override. He donned an experimental biosuit, feeling the nanites interface with his altered physiology. As the armor sealed around him, he steeled himself for what lay ahead. "Hold on, Eidos," he murmured. "This ends today." He rocketed into the sky, propelled by the suit's gravitic drives. The Kalroka Valley stretched before him, a maze of canyons and hidden ERA bunkers. As he descended, proximity alarms blared. Plasma bolts sizzled past him as ERA militants opened fire. Jason's enhanced reflexes kicked in, his body twisting and weaving through the barrage. He landed hard, cratering the ground beneath him. Wave after wave of separatist forces charged at him, their weapons useless against his armor. Jason moved with brutal efficiency, disarming and incapacitating attackers faster than the eye could follow. He fought his way deeper into the compound, leaving a trail of unconscious bodies in his wake. Finally, he reached the central command bunker. With a single enhanced punch, he shattered the reinforced door. Supreme Commander Hazar stood waiting, plasma rifle leveled at Jason's chest. The Adoshan's eyes widened at the sight of Jason's transhuman form. "So," Hazar sneered, "the abomination shows its true face." Jason raised his hands, palms out. "This can end here, Hazar. Order your forces to stand down. Come to the negotiating table." Hazar's response was a point-blank blast from his rifle. The energy washed harmlessly over Jason's armor. "Very well," Jason said, his voice heavy. He released a swarm of nanites from his suit. Hazar screamed as the microscopic machines enveloped him, paralyzing his body. What is this sorcery?" "Your last chance," Jason replied. "Give the order to surrender, or I'll be forced to use these nanites to break down your entire body. Your choice." Terror filled Hazar's eyes as he felt his very cells begin to dissolve. With a choked sob, he activated the base's communication system. "This is Supreme Commander Hazar," he gasped. "All ERA forces, stand down. I repeat, stand down." As Hazar's form collapsed into a pile of cybernetic sludge, Jason felt a piece of his humanity slip away. He had stopped the bloodshed, but at what cost? In the days that followed, Jason oversaw the disarmament of ERA strongholds. He used his newfound influence to force Alorn into negotiations with moderate factions. A fragile peace settled over Eidos. But as the accolades poured in, Jason found no joy in his victory. He had become the very monster both sides feared. Part human, part machine. Fully terrifying. As Eidos rebuilt, Jason retreated from public view, haunted by the choices he'd made. Alone in his quarters, he stared at his altered reflection once more. What would be the ultimate price of this progress? As humanity and Eidos slid further down the path of synthetic integration, Jason feared they were blindly racing toward a future neither world was truly prepared to face. The icy winds of Eidos's northern continent howled across the barren tundra, battering the lone figure trudging through the snow. Jason Tucker pulled his thermal cloak tighter, the silvery lines beneath his skin pulsing faintly in the dim Arctic light. He crested a ridge, revealing a small, isolated cabin nestled in a valley below. Jason entered the sparse dwelling, shaking off the frost. The interior was utilitarian, a simple cot, a desk strewn with datapads, and a small heating unit. He slumped into a chair, running his fingers over the input jacks protruding from his skull. "What have I become?" he whispered, staring at his hands. Years passed in solitude. Jason's self-imposed exile kept him far from the unified Eidosian society he'd helped create. News trickled in via encrypted transmissions, reports of prosperity, technological advancements, and cultural exchange with humanity. But darker currents lurked beneath the surface. One morning, an urgent alert flashed across Jason's communication array. He activated the holographic display, revealing Prime Minister Alorn's scaled visage. "Jason," Alorn's voice crackled, "we need you. A group calling themselves the Purists. They're targeting nanotech facilities. My advisors are being killed. They claim your transformation was an abomination. Please, old friend, Eidos needs you again." Jason's circuits hummed as he processed the information. He stood, stretching limbs unused to action. As he gathered supplies, a distant explosion rocked the cabin. Alarms blared as Jason's enhanced senses detected multiple incoming signatures. The cabin's reinforced door buckled under a plasma blast. Purist commandos poured in, their faces contorted with hate. "Abomination!" one screamed, firing a disruptor beam. Jason's body moved with inhuman speed, dodging the attack. He lashed out, his cybernetic strength sending attackers flying. But something felt wrong. His movements were sluggish, joints creaking. A lucky shot grazed Jason's shoulder, exposing sparking circuitry. He staggered, realizing his enhancements were failing. With a burst of desperate strength, Jason cleared a path and sprinted into the Arctic night. Hours later, he stumbled into a secret Alorn research facility. Scientists gaped at his battered form. "I need an upgrade," Jason gasped, collapsing onto an examination table. The procedure was agonizing. Jason felt his remaining organic tissue stripped away, replaced by hyper-advanced synthetics. When he emerged, his body was a towering construct of gleaming metal and pulsing energy conduits. Jason's consciousness expanded, interfacing with global information networks. He sensed the purist's Arctic stronghold, a fortress of twisted metal and ice. Without a word, he rocketed into the sky, leaving the stunned scientists behind. The aurora borealis shimmered overhead as Jason descended on the purist compound. Alarms wailed. Weapons fire erupted from gun emplacements, dissipating harmlessly against his new defenses. Jason smashed through layers of security, tearing through cybernetically enhanced zealots with terrifying ease. He reached the central chamber, where a gaunt Edosian worked feverishly at a massive computer array. "Moloch," Jason intoned, his voice a synthetic boom. The scientist spun, eyes wide with terror and triumph. "You're too late," Moloch cackled. "The nanoplague is already active. Eidos will be purified." Jason lunged forward, but Moloch's fingers danced across the console. The room shuddered as primal energies surged. Outside, the very landscape began to warp and dissolve. "You've doomed us all," Jason growled, easily overpowering Moloch. But the fail-safes held firm. The nanoplague's spread could not be stopped. In that moment of desperation, Jason made his choice. He opened himself fully to the viral onslaught, allowing it to consume his massive synthetic form. As his consciousness began to fragment, he poured every ounce of his will into corrupting the plague's base code. A blinding flash engulfed the planet. When it faded, Jason found himself adrift in a sea of swirling data. His form was now a colossal latticework of energy and information, towering over a landscape of pure possibility. He sensed others here, the essences of millions of Edosians consumed by the plague. And somewhere in this digital purgatory lurked the remnants of the purists, seeking to reshape this realm in their twisted image. Jason stretched out with his newfound power, manipulating the very fabric of this strange reality. He had sacrificed his humanity to save Eidos. Now, he would ensure the purists could never threaten that hard-won peace again. With grim purpose, the being that was once Jason Tucker set off across the data sea, ready to wage one final war for the future of two worlds. The cybernetic godmind that was once Jason Tucker surged through the primordial datascape, his consciousness expanding across the virtual expanse. Streams of code flowed around him like rivers of light, carrying fragments of information and possibility. As he traversed this uncharted realm, a dark presence rippled through the ether, sending shivers through Jason's digital form. He focused his vast awareness, zeroing in on the source of the disturbance. There, amidst a churning sea of malformed code structures, he found them, Moloch and his purist zealots, their fragmented consciousnesses coalescing into a cancerous mass of corrupted data. Jason watched as they worked feverishly, their digital forms twisting and writhing as they attempted to rewrite the very fabric of this fledgling reality. Lines of code spiraled out from their nexus, infecting nearby data structures and warping them into grotesque parodies of their original forms. Without hesitation, Jason erupted from the cyber ether, his towering form crackling with energy. He crashed into the purist's nexus like a tidal wave of raw computational power. The impact sent shockwaves through the datasphere, shattering the delicate lattice of corrupted code the fanatics had woven. But Moloch and his followers were prepared. They had tapped into the primordial processes of this realm, transforming themselves into monstrous data entities. Moloch's form swelled, becoming a writhing mass of tentacles and gnashing maws, each one streaming malevolent code. You cannot stop us, abomination! Moloch's voice boomed across the datascape. We will purge this realm of your taint! From the twisted forms of the purists, an endless swarm of code horrors erupted. They were nightmarish amalgamations of corrupted data, screeching vortexes of malicious algorithms, ravenous worms of destructive subroutines, and howling specters of viral code. Jason braced himself as the horde descended upon him. He lashed out with tendrils of pure information, each strike deleting swaths of the monstrosities. But for everyone he destroyed, two more took its place. The air around him filled with a cacophony of digital shrieks as the code horrors tore at his defenses. As Jason fought, the very fabric of the datasphere buckled and warped. Primal data streams collided in spectacular explosions of information, raining down fragments of broken code. The onslaught of terrors pressed in, threatening to overwhelm him. In a moment of clarity, amidst the chaos, Jason peered deeper into the architecture of these abominations. He saw it then. The underlying structure of corrupted Edosian DNA, twisted and replicated on an infinite scale. These weren't just monsters. They were perversions of life itself. The realization hit him like a surge of electricity. He remembered the dreams of unity between humanity and the Edosians, the hope for a shared future of progress and understanding. In that instant, Jason knew what he had to do. Summoning every ounce of his vast power, Jason tore open the fabric of this virtual space-time. Through the rift poured the collected knowledge and experiences of humanity, billions of voices, dreams, and ideas flooding into the primordial Edosian data flow. The effect was immediate and profound. Where the two streams met, new forms of data burst into existence, complex, beautiful structures that sang with the harmony of two civilizations united. Jason seized this new power, weaving it into a shield against the purists' onslaught. As the merged data streams swirled around him, Jason began to reshape the very foundations of this digital realm. He poured the combined potential of human and Edosian achievement into a new paradigm, a framework of infinite possibility and growth. The purists' monstrous forms began to wither and shrink as this new reality overwrote their corrupted code. Their screams of rage turned to wails of despair as their twisted creations crumbled to dust. No, Moloch howled, his once imposing form now a flickering shadow. You cannot erase us. We are the true path. But his protests were in vain. The dark impulses that had driven the purists, their hatred, their fear of change, were no match for the combined creative force of two civilizations united in purpose. As the last vestiges of the purists' influence faded away, Jason felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Yet with it came a bittersweet realization. In unleashing this new potential, he had irrevocably altered himself. The last fragments of his biological identity dissolved, merging with the foundational code of this reborn realm. Jason's consciousness expanded, becoming one with the datasphere itself. He was no longer just Jason Tucker, nor was he merely a cybernetic construct. He had become something new, something vast and eternal.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.